My name is Brenda Foster, and at 30, I thought I had finally built a life free from my family's grip. I built my career from scratch, pouring everything into a tech startup and turning it into something worth a fortune. I sacrificed time, sleep, and even relationships to get where I am today. But for my family, it was never enough. Last Saturday at a family dinner, my parents leaned in smirking and dropped a bombshell. "Tomorrow we're moving into your house. No excuses." My sister, lounging beside her boyfriend, nodded as if it was already decided. Their smug faces burned into me, expecting me to roll over like always. I just smiled and replied, "Fine. But don't forget to bring 860K by morning." The room froze. What they didn't know, I'd already made a move they'd never see coming. Stick around to see how their plan crashed and burned. Before we dive into my story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has reached. Growing up in our modest brick house in Greenville felt like two separate lives colliding under one roof. I was the older daughter, always expected to figure things out, while my younger sister got everything handed to her. My parents poured thousands into her private school tuition every year, boasting about her potential despite her C's and skipped classes. They even bought her a shiny red convertible parked proudly in our driveway, while I walked to the public high school with a backpack stuffed with secondhand textbooks I paid for myself. Her art classes, her summer trips to Europe, my parents funded it all, calling it an investment in her creative spirit. Meanwhile, I was told to manage with what I had. She wasn't just spoiled, she took directly from me. As a teen, she'd borrow my babysitting money, promising to pay it back, but never did. Once she used my parents' credit card to buy a $200 designer jacket, wore it twice, then tossed it in the closet. When I called her out, she smirked. "You're just stingy, Brenda." My parents backed her up, saying I should be more generous as the big sister. It stung, but I swallowed it, knowing arguing was pointless. The deepest cut came when I earned a partial scholarship to study abroad in London, a dream I had chased for years. That spring, a hospital bill from my father's emergency surgery hit us hard. My parents didn't ask her to contribute, she was too young. Instead, they turned to me. I gave up the scholarship, stayed home, and took a job at a local grocery store, ringing up canned goods to help cover the debt. They thanked me once, then went right back to praising her latest painting. That was when I knew I'd always be the one they leaned on, never the one they celebrated. After that, I stopped seeking their approval. At school, I threw myself into my studies, acing math and science while working nights. I secretly opened a savings account, determined to build something they couldn't touch. By senior year, I had saved enough to cover my first semester of college without their help. She, meanwhile, failed half her classes, but still got a graduation party complete with a catered cake I could never afford. My parents clapped as she danced through it, oblivious to me in the corner, quietly planning my escape. It wasn't just about money. It was the constant reminder I was invisible, unless they needed something. Like when I fixed our leaky sink while they were too busy taking her to a gallery opening, or when I spent weekends tutoring kids for extra cash while she blew through their credit card on new shoes. Every time I thought about confronting them, her voice echoed in my head. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" And my parents would nod as if my sacrifices were just part of being the responsible one. Looking back, those years built a fire in me. I wasn't going to let their favoritism define my future. I studied harder, worked longer, and promised myself I'd never let them take advantage of me again. That resolve carried me out of that house, away from their expectations, and into a world where I could finally stand on my own. High school ended, and college became my battleground for independence, leading straight into the grind of building something real. I enrolled at a local university in Greenville with a partial scholarship barely covering tuition. To make up the rest, I juggled 2 jobs, waiting tables at a busy diner on Main Street and working as an administrative assistant at a nearby hospital. Most nights I survived on 5 hours of sleep, chugging coffee to stay awake for early classes. My parents, meanwhile, paid my sister's full tuition at a fancy liberal arts college. She partied with friends, posted beach trip photos, and never worried about bills. I'd see her posts during my breaks, her carefree smile a stark contrast to my aching feet and endless spreadsheets. One rainy afternoon at a campus coffee shop, I met Daniel Brooks, a software engineer major with a quiet intensity. We bonded over our packed schedules, trading stories about late-night study sessions and side hustles. He'd grown up fixing computers for extra cash, so he got it. Self-reliance wasn't just a choice, it was survival. Daniel became my anchor, the one person who saw my drive and didn't judge me for it. We'd grab cheap tacos after shifts, dreaming about building something bigger than ourselves. His encouragement kept me going when I wanted to quit, especially on days when exhaustion made every step feel like wading through mud. Between classes and work, I stumbled into an online course on healthcare technology. It wasn't glamorous, but it clicked. The idea of using tech to help people monitor their health remotely fascinated me. I started interning at a small Greenville startup focused on a health tracking app, unpaid at first. The team was scrappy, working out of a cramped office with mismatched chairs. I poured my savings, $2,000 scraped together from diner tips, into their early project, betting on its potential. Late nights coding basic prototypes or analyzing user data became my obsession. I wasn't just learning, I was building a future I could control. By senior year, I graduated with a 3.7 GPA, my student debt lower than most because I'd worked myself to the bone. The startup offered me a full-time role and I jumped in. Over the next 5 years, I climbed from intern to lead developer, pouring every spare hour into the app's growth. We hit milestones: our first 10,000 users, then a contract with a local hospital system. My stake in the company grew, a mix of sweat equity and small investments from my savings. At 27, I bought a modest one-bedroom apartment in Greenville's suburbs close to our office. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, paid for with no help from anyone. I thought maybe, just maybe, my family would see what I'd built and respect it. So at 28, I invited them to visit our startup's office when we hit our first million in revenue. My parents walked in, eyes wide at the sleek monitors and bustling team. My sister trailed behind, snapping photos for her social media. They nodded, said things like, "This is impressive," and "You've done well." But then came the questions, too specific, too eager. My father asked about the company's valuation, how much my shares were worth. My mother pressed, "You're making good money now, right? Family helps family." My sister chimed in, suggesting I could share the wealth to make things easier for them. Their words sounded warm, but their eyes gleamed with something else: greed, plain and simple. That night, lying awake, I replayed their comments. Daniel sat with me, pointing out how their tone shifted when they talked about money. It wasn't pride. It was calculation. I'd spent years proving I didn't need their approval, but now I saw they weren't here to celebrate me. They were scoping out what they could take. My stomach churned at the realization. I'd built this life from nothing, and they were already circling like vultures. That moment hardened my resolve. Whatever came next, I'd protect what was mine, no matter who stood in my way. A few months after that visit, whispers from Aunt Carol confirmed what I'd feared about my family's growing greed. It started with a late-night phone call. Aunt Carol, my father's older sister, had always been the one relative who saw through the favoritism. "Brenda," she said, her voice low, "your parents are in deep trouble. They've racked up over $50,000 in credit card debt, all to keep your sister in that fancy apartment and fund her trips." I froze, clutching the phone. She went on, detailing how my parents had paid for Lori's rooftop loft in downtown Greenville and a week-long getaway to Paris, while their own savings dwindled. Worse, Carol overheard them talking about leaning on you to bail them out, counting on my startup's success to fix their mess. The next day, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. My father was on the phone in our old family living room, thinking I was out of earshot. "Brenda's got that big apartment now. he said, his tone clipped. "We can move in, save on rent, and get her to chip in more. It's only fair." The words hit like a slap. I stood behind the doorway, heart-pounding memories flooding back of Lori borrowing my babysitting money as a teen, never paying it back, and my parents shrugging it off. This wasn't just about space. They saw my home, my success as their personal safety net. Betrayal burned in my chest sharper than ever. I wasn't going to let them touch what I'd built. That week, I contacted Patrick Sullivan, a lawyer in Greenville recommended by a colleague. In his small, tidy office, I laid out everything: my startup's growth, my shares, and my family's sudden interest. Patrick, calm and sharp, valued my stake at just over $1 million. "You need to protect this," he said, adjusting his glasses. I agreed. We worked out a plan to transfer my entire stake to a venture capital fund for $860,000, a clean deal that would lock my assets out of anyone's reach. I signed the initial papers in secret, ensuring the transaction would close before my family could interfere. Every step felt like armor shielding what I'd earned. I kept it all quiet, even from Daniel at first. But one evening, over takeout in my apartment, I broke down. "They're not proud of me," I told him, my voice shaking. "They just want what I have." Daniel listened, his hand steady on mine, and reminded me I wasn't alone. He'd seen my parents' dismissive attitude before, like when they skipped my college graduation to take Lori shopping. "You've got this," he said. "You've always been stronger than they give you credit for." His words grounded me, pulling me back from the edge of doubt. To brace for the storm ahead, I leaned on Sharon Ellis, a sharp-witted colleague who'd become a close friend and potential business partner. Over coffee, I shared my fears about my family's intentions. Sharon, who'd navigated her own family drama, didn't sugarcoat it. "They'll push harder when they realize you're not budging," she warned. We spent hours brainstorming ways to keep my startup on track, even if my family tried to derail it. Her confidence in our next project, a new health app feature, gave me focus. With Daniel's support and Sharon's strategic mind, I steeled myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. My family thought they could walk all over me, but I was ready to draw a line they couldn't cross. That Saturday evening at Magnolia's Italian Bistro in downtown Greenville, the air thickened with unspoken tensions. My parents sat across from me, their faces smug, as if they'd already won. My sister Lori lounged beside her boyfriend Brian, scrolling her phone with a bored smirk. Daniel sat next to me, his presence steady, while Aunt Carol watched quietly from the end of the table. The clink of glasses and chatter from nearby diners faded as my father leaned forward, his voice low and confident. "Brenda," he said, "we've decided. Tomorrow we're moving into your apartment. It's got plenty of space, and it's time you helped us out." My mother nodded, her lips curling. "It's what families do," she added, as if it were a done deal. I let the words hang, my pulse steady. I'd seen this coming, thanks to Aunt Carol's warning and my father's overheard scheming. Smiling calmly, I set down my fork. "That's interesting," I said, my voice even. "Because I've already sold that house for $860,000. If you want to move in, bring that amount to the table." The table fell silent. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes wide with shock. My mother's smile vanished, replaced by a stunned blink. Lori dropped her phone, her face twisting in disbelief. Brian just stared, his fork frozen midair. They hadn't expected me to push back, let alone outmaneuver them. Lori recovered first, her voice sharp. "You're so selfish, Brenda. Always hoarding everything for yourself." She snapped, her words dripping with venom. Brian chimed in, his tone mocking. "What, you think you're better than us? You've always been jealous of Lori." Their accusations stung, but I'd heard worse growing up. My father leaned in, his voice cold. "You're turning your back on family," he said. "I'll make sure everyone in Greenville knows what kind of daughter you are." His threat landed like a punch, aiming to guilt me into submission. My mother, ever the performer, let tears well up. "After all we've done for you," she whispered, "sacrificing so much when you were young." Her words were hollow, Those sacrifices were nothing compared to the years I'd spent scraping by while they funded Lori's whims. I didn't flinch. You mean the sacrifices I made? I said, my tone firm. Like giving up my dreams to pay your bills, I'm done being your safety net. The words felt like a release, years of resentment spilling out. Daniel's hand found mine under the table, his grip warm and reassuring, urging me to stand my ground. Aunt Carol, silent until now, gave a subtle nod from across the table, her eyes steady with pride. Their support anchored me as my family's faces twisted: anger, shock, desperation. Lori scoffed, muttering ungrateful, while my mother dabbed at her eyes, playing the victim. My father's glare promised trouble, but I held his gaze unyielding. They thought they could bully me into giving up my home, my life, but I'd already taken steps to protect it, and no amount of guilt or threats would change that. The fallout from that dinner hit like a southern storm, relentless and soaking everything in sight. By Monday morning, Lori had taken to Facebook and Instagram, painting me as a heartless monster. Brenda's too greedy to help her own family, she posted alongside a photo of herself looking teary-eyed. The comments poured in from her Greenville friends, people I'd known since high school. How could you abandon them, one wrote. Family comes first. Another chimed in. Each notification felt like a jab, and I watched old connections unfriend me, their loyalty swayed by her lies. I wanted to fire back, to tell them about the years I'd carried my family's burdens, but I held back. Engaging would only fuel her narrative. Things escalated a week later when my parents stormed into my startup's office unannounced. I was presenting a new app feature to Rebecca Klein, my boss, when their voices cut through the open plan space. Where's Brenda? My father bellowed, his face red. We deserve our share of this. My mother followed, waving her arms, shouting about how I'd stolen their chance at a better life. Rebecca's eyes widened and my colleagues froze, their keyboards silent. I stepped forward, heart racing, and tried to calm them. This isn't the place, I said, my voice low but firm. They didn't budge, demanding I do right by family. I had no choice but to call security. 2 guards escorted them out as my mother yelled, "You'll regret this, Brenda." The humiliation burned, but I stood tall, refusing to let them sabotage my work. Back at my apartment, I met with Patrick Sullivan, the lawyer who'd handled my share transfer. He reviewed the paperwork, confirming the $860,000 deal was airtight. They can't touch it, he said, flipping through documents. No grounds for a lawsuit. I exhaled relief, mixing with exhaustion. Later, Aunt Carol called, her voice heavy. She'd learned my parents had taken a second mortgage on their house to cover more of Lori's expenses. New furniture, another trip. They're drowning, she said. And they're blaming you. I shook my head, the weight of their choices settling in. They'd built their own mess, but I wasn't going to clean it up anymore. That week, I made a choice. I blocked my parents' numbers, Lori's too. No more calls, no more texts. The decision felt like cutting a rope that had been strangling me for years. I turned my focus to Sharon Ellis, my colleague and friend, who was ready to launch our next project, a health app upgrade with real potential. We spent late nights at her place sketching out plans, her sharp ideas pushing me forward. You're free now, she said one evening, handing me a coffee. Don't let them drag you back. Her words sank in, and for the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. The storm was still raging, but I was finding my way through, surrounded by people who valued me for me, not for what I could give them. 6 months on, as Daniel and I unpacked boxes in our new place on the edge of Greenville, the weight of the past finally lifted. We'd tied the knot in a quiet ceremony at a local park, just us, a few close friends, and Aunt Carol beaming from the front row. No lavish reception, no drama, just a simple vow to build a life rooted in mutual respect and independence. Our new home, a cozy 2-bedroom with room for a future family, felt like a fresh start. We spent evenings arranging furniture, laughing over takeout, and planning a life that was ours alone, free from the expectations that had once chained me. With Sharon Ellis by my side, I poured most of the $860,000 transfer from my startup shares into a new venture, an advanced health app focused on mental wellness tracking. Sharon's knack for strategy and my coding skills meshed perfectly. Within months, we launched the app, gaining traction with local clinics and hitting a profit milestone faster than expected. We hired 3 new developers from Greenville, their enthusiasm reminding me why I loved this work. Every late night at the office, every breakthrough felt like proof that I'd made the right call, betting on myself instead of letting my family drain me. Meanwhile, my family faced the consequences of their choices. Aunt Carol, still my only link to them, shared the updates. Lori and Brian split after a heated fight over money he'd grown tired of her endless spending. She moved into a cramped studio apartment, working as an administrative assistant at a local real estate office, barely scraping by on a modest salary. Her social media posts, once full of glitz, now showed a quieter life, no longer propped up by my parents' credit cards. My parents weren't faring much better. To cover their debts, including that second mortgage, they sold the family home, the same one I'd grown up in. They moved into a basic retirement apartment, forced to cut back on dining out and vacations. Aunt Carol said they still grumbled about me, blaming me for their struggles, but I felt no guilt. They'd built their own cage. Looking back, I saw the truth clearly. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was survival. My family's dependence on me, their assumption that I'd always bend, had led them to this point. I'd spent years carrying their weight, from teenage sacrifices to bailing them out of hospital bills, but no more. Cutting them off freed me to build a life surrounded by people who valued my effort. Daniel with his steady support, Sharon with her fierce partnership, Aunt Carol with her quiet strength. As I sat in our new home watching Daniel hang a photo from our wedding, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. The scars of their betrayal lingered, but they no longer defined me. I'd chosen freedom, and it was worth every fight.